Hello, hello. Happy Marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are well. I am Karissa Span, the landlord and tenant coach. I'm so excited that you are joining me today. I'm sharing information today that will help landlords, tenants, as well as the entire rental community. And so I have with me a special guest. He is no stranger. For those of you who have been tuning in, you've probably already seen him on the show, but I'm excited to have him back today. We are going to discuss a much needed topic. And this is what I do each and every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I bring you information whether you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. For those of you who are watching the replay, I do appreciate you. I'm going to now bring on my special guest. He is an author. He's a superstar. We have both been in the industry for almost 3 decades. That's almost 30 years. So combined, my special guest and I, we have almost 60 years of experience in the rental property, the real estate, property management arena. I want to introduce to some, present to others, none other than my superstar, my super amazing partner, Mr. Keith Childs.
Hey, whoa, who was that gentleman you just described? Wow, I appreciate that.
Hey, Keith.
Hey, what's up, Carissa? How you feeling, Carissa?
Happy Marvelous Monday. I'm fantastic. How are you?
Great. Happy Monday. Everything is a blessed Monday. It's a blessed day. Great. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So, Keith, today we are talking about a much needed topic, as you already know. This is a continuation from what we've previously discussed, talking about death. Keith, as you know, it's never really an easy topic, but for landlords, it can be bothersome to handle this sensitive situation, but also for tenants, usually they don't prepare for it. But before we get into the discussion, Keith, I just want you to give an introduction of who you are for our viewers who are just tuned in for the very first time. Let the people know who you are and why you're here today, Keith.
So, all right, my name is Keith Childs. How y'all doing? First of all, my name is Keith Childs. Actually been in this wonderful field of property management for, I should say, 25 or more years. Maybe a little over 25. Also, currently I'm an author of fiction books. I write fiction books. Got a great series out now. Easy Prey. It's the name. Just a little plug. Shameless plug. But nevertheless, my background is in property management for the last, let's say 25 years. I enjoy what I do. I care about these tenants, and it is a joy. So to be on this platform with Karissa, I'm always honored that she invites me onto a platform. I'm always honored with that. So I'm here to have some fun, and let's dive into it. Let's get into learning something. And one thing I like about the platform is it teaches landlords as well as tenants. So we're here. I'm here.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Keith. Thank you for those of you who are tuned in. Thank you for those of you all who have shared the live, the replay. I do ask that if you find any of the information that we shared today to be helpful, go ahead, tag, share it with someone else, because we want to get this information to as many people as possible. And I just want to know if you're tuning in for the very first time, let us know where you're watching from. Let us know what platform you're on. We are streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. So let us know where you're tuned in from. We love to get your feedback. So any questions, any comments that you have, go ahead and drop it in the comment section today. And I just want to make this disclaimer that the information that we are sharing today, it is not legal information. It is not legal advice. However, we are indeed sharing the industry's best tips and practices for landlords, as well as just sharing some rights for tenants. So Keith, let's get into the discussion today because I have some information that I would like for us to talk about, tips for tenants, but then also some information for landlords. So Keith, we normally share information for landlords first, but today I just want to talk to tenants,
Okay.
just share a few tips for tenants, um,
Okay.
because I believe that sometimes tenants, they they don't feel the love because they say we're always talking to landlords, we're always sharing information for landlords. So I want to
Oh,
share some tips for landlords first. But Keith,
it
I
is
know that you know
tennis,
this. Hmm?
the tennis first.
For tenants first. Yeah, I'm sorry. So we're going to share information for tenants first, and then we're going to get into some tips for landlords. So Keith, I know that this is something that you do in your practice. This is something that you've been doing over the years. And the first tip that I want to share with tenants is this: is to make sure that they are providing emergency contact information to their landlords. Keith, what's your feedback on this? Do you think that's helpful? Do you think it's important for tenants to provide emergency contact information to their landlords?
Absolutely, it's actually essential. It's a must because dealing with actually what I'm currently managing now is our seniors and disabled tenants, right? So, but just for everyone, you need to have very important to provide emergency contact in the midst of something happening, and you need something happen to your tenant, and you need to be able to go right to their file, and you need to have someone that they can contact. So, absolutely, it's a must. You must provide emergency contact and make sure that the contact information stay current. So that means to check it so often. I do mine quarterly to make sure numbers ain't changed or, stuff like that because you don't want to ever have to be an emergency happens and you go to make a call and that number is not working. So absolutely essential to do that.
That's a good point. And so, Keith, you said you do your updates quarterly.
Yes, quarterly. I try to
Okay.
go quarterly. Or it can do, or it can be, I don't. Make a point. I put in my calendar to go through. Of course, if you have a lot of things like I have, it's hard to try to do them all. But I try to do my whole property. Maybe I do a portion of them quarterly, then I go back and do another portion. So that way I break it down. But you want to make sure your contact list is along with other stuff. But your contact list is one thing from the list that you're checking.
So that's a good point. I never thought about doing it quarterly, but I do make sure that one of the things that I've always recommended is to do it at least once a year. So if you're doing yours quarterly, that's good. But obviously, there are some landlords, Keith, that may have a large portfolio, and so quarterly may be a little cumbersome. But I would suggest to definitely do it at least once a year. Just making sure that that information is updated. And that's a good point, Keith. And so if you're a tenant, you want to make sure that you are providing this information to your landlord because your emergency contact is the first person that your landlord or even emergency um, emergency service providers will contact in the event that something happens to you. So you want to make sure that you're providing your landlord with that information. Um, Keith, I do want to also include this tip here
Mhm.
for tenants to provide a power of attorney.
Yeah.
Um, and I know that in many cases, tenants don't understand how important that is. So, Keith, we both can touch on this because you and I have been in the housing industry. So whether we've managed rental property that was in some sort of housing subsidy program, whether it was a market rental property, Section 8 property, public housing property, or whatever, having a power of attorney is so important. If you are a tenant, right, and you want someone to advocate on your behalf, to contact your landlord, uh, you have to have something documented in order for your landlord to conduct business, for them to talk to your landlord, for them to contact the housing authority if you're in a housing program, or your case manager or your social worker. Keith, I'm going to ask that you touch on that for a little bit.
Yes, that is why I'm glad you brought that up because I actually have a case of that just here recently. In housing, we're actually doing some recertifications, and one of my tenants, actually one of my tenants who it's time to get recertified for housing or trying to get certified for housing, had a stroke. And when I reached out to him, his sister answered the phone and said her brother had a stroke. He was very interested in getting a place to stay, but he was incapacitated at the moment, and she wanted to do business on his behalf. Unfortunately, she can't make those decisions legally. So I mentioned to her that she needs to get a power of attorney. She had no idea. She heard of it, but she had no idea on how to go about getting or obtaining a power of attorney. But I explained to her that that's the only way legally that she can speak on his behalf. She can make decisions on his behalf, where he stays, anything legally. She had to get a power of attorney. So those things are so important, to do. So I'm glad you talked on that, because I do want to also, because there may be some of your listeners out there that may need to know that information. Can't assume they know how to get a power of attorney. So I'm gonna throw it back to you, Karissa. Just you may want to kind of elaborate on what they can do or how can they go about even obtaining a power of attorney for themselves.
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely touch on that. And Keith, just like you, I had a young lady who she wasn't incapacitated, but there was some sort of mental health issues going on, and something happened. She was out of the unit, and her daughter contacted the landlord, as well as the social worker agency that she was affiliated with, and nobody would talk to her relative because there was nothing on file, right? And here's what I want tenants to know and understand. Due to the privacy laws, I know that you may think that because someone is related to you, whether it's your sibling, your children, whoever, right? In whatever capacity a person is related, if they are not on the lease by law, the landlord, your case manager, your social worker, your housing agency, they are prohibited from revealing or sharing information to
Mm-hmm.
anybody else about you, your business, your case, whatever is going on. So please understand the importance of getting the power of attorney. And it's not really anything that's super expensive, but I would suggest to reach out to maybe an attorney, because I cannot give legal advice, but just reach out to an attorney who specializes in this field, and they can pretty much, they'll provide you with the form and tell you what you have to do, and it's a really quick process. You don't have to go to court, you don't have to draw blood, it's not super complicated, but it's definitely worth having. So please look into that. Now, just depending on where you live, the process may be a little bit different, so I don't want to give specific information in any direction, but I would definitely say that as a tenant, do yourself a big favor. Even if you don't think that you're going to have any issues. Listen, I promise. My father, when he passed away, Keith, he was 94. He did everything on his own. He walked, he talked, and he still drove. He got in the yard and he cut his own grass and stuff like that. Right. And I know that sometimes we just think that we are like this Energizer bunny that will continue to keep going and going and going. But I promise you that it's much better to have that information on file,
Mm-hmm.
and not need it versus being in a situation, needing it and not having it. Keith, you talked about your tenant who had a stroke. I'm sure they never thought that anything
Right.
was going to happen, right? And so we certainly don't want to see people in those type of predicaments. And so, Keith, in that situation with your tenant who had a stroke, how was that handled? Like,
Well, what they're doing now, that was just recent. So she's now trying to try to obtain the right information so she can get that power of attorney information, so she can now become his legal guardian to take care of his affairs. So that's still ongoing. So I'm gonna follow back up with her. I think I said on Thursday after give me a call to see where she's going, because he has some stuff pressing that need to be done and decisions need to be made. But he actually had to do them, but of course he can't. So she's trying to get everything done. So hopefully this week she will obtain that power of attorney information that's needed, and then we can move forward with trying to help him, but we can't reveal no information or anything about the tenant until we get that power of attorney signed, that form signed. So that's definitely that was and let me just elaborate on another one too, Chris. I had another tenant who mom, this was kind of different though. Well, kind of the same, but it was like her mom, his mom, the gentleman stays with me. He's in a wheelchair, and his wife. And the mom, I guess, gives the wife money. And for some reason, the wife don't let the mom in the house. And the mom was upset. She came in the office, going off, not really upset, want to get in to see her son because he's in a wheelchair. And nothing we can do, even though she gives them money and she don't think the daughter's doing right by it. But she said she has power of attorney, but she didn't provide it. So she wanted us to let her in the house with her son. And I was like, there's nothing we can do unless your name's out on the lease and you don't have power of attorney. We just can't open the door and let you in the property. So those are things that, if she had power of attorney, by all right, we could have let her in. But the fact she didn't have power of attorney, she was just upset, and stayed out there. So
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's so heartbreaking because I know that sometimes a lot of people don't really understand it, whether they're paying, whether they're giving money, loved ones, they just seem to believe that because, they are not able to reach their loved ones, and there can be some legit legal things, I'm sorry, some medical things going on with them, and maybe they haven't heard from their loved ones, and it's unfortunate that, people don't really think about this in advance. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation, Keith. I'm glad that, this is a discussion that we are sharing because it is much needed. I want to go to our comment section before we go to our next tip. Hey, Ben, thank you so much for tuning in on YouTube. Hello, Lady Isaac. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keith, we have Sheena with us. She said, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Sheena.
Okay, Lady Isaac said we have an owner as well that passed away, and I'm sure that a lot of landlords can weigh in on this. This resonates with a lot of landlords, a lot of housing providers, a lot of people who are working in the housing industry in various roles and capacities. It's so unfortunate that many tenants find themselves in these situations. And if they just plan in advance, if they just tune in on Mondays, get this information, and just do a little bit of planning and preparation, it may benefit them in the long run. So Keith, I just want tenants to understand that with the power of attorney, again, it's someone who can handle certain matters on their behalf, and to definitely reach out to an attorney who can help them with that. The third thing I want tenants to understand is this, Keith, is that they should prepare a legal will.
Yeah.
That's so important.
Very important. And that's important across the board for everyone. That's, I think it's one of those things, Karissa, where when you speak about, for some reason, I think in our community, I'm going to say, but maybe everywhere, but in our community, I know strongly, wills and life insurance and stuff like that, we tend to back away from it, don't want to talk about, as if we start talking about a will or life insurance, it must mean we're feeling like we're about to die or something, right? So we kind of stay away from those conversations, but they so needed. Like when you're in your right state of mind, and I'm talking to myself now, right? You got to sit down, take time out, prepare a will, get your life insurance, get your affairs in order. So because inevitably it happens to all of us, right? We all believe. So, but we need to be prepared. Prepared and make sure that you leaving someone in a better situation. As I always say, you don't want to leave people, your loved ones, in debt. So you want to make sure you set yourself up now. So when that time comes, that is set up. So that's done with a will. Get a will, put it in place. So because we all know if there's any piece of money that's left out there unclaimed, those type of things breaks up families, unfortunately, but they do. Some of the best, you think when money hit the table, when money hits, everything get funny, right? So you want to make sure while you're a sound mind, if you're a homeowner or whatever you have, you kind of put that in writing, who gets what goes where, to whom, because that keeps it that much better and have your affairs lined up. Real quick, one of my good friends, his grandmother just passed away, rest her soul, 94 years old. Like that, 94. But one thing was so impressed, he was so impressed because my buddy, he was taking over everything. He had the power of attorney, so he was taking over. He was kind of worried about, not really worried, but concerned with what to do. And, because, he was his grandma. So what he found out was when she passed away, Miss Young had everything. Never mentioned it, but had everything in order. She had already paid for the burial. She already paid for the funeral. She had already had stuff lined up. So it just made stuff so much easier on his side. It was a weight off his shoulder. Like when he found out, it was like, oh, she paid for this. Oh, she been paid for a burial. Oh, this is paid for. She had paid for a lot. Everything was done. He had to come out of pocket with zero because she had already taken care of that stuff already. So she had already had it done. So, we can do that. That just makes life so much better. So yeah, so I said a long way around, but yes, preparing for a will, I think that's definitely, we all need to do that.
Yeah, that's so true. Listen, when my father passed away and many years ago, I think probably when I was in elementary school, my father had already paid for his plot at the cemetery and all that stuff. So when he passed away, it wasn't really complicated. We didn't have to set up a GoFundMe account. And I thank God for that. But unfortunately, Keith, people don't know, people don't think, or,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they just don't prepare or plan in advance because
Right,
here's what I do know about life. We're all going to die. Everybody's going
right.
to pass away. And so I'm having this conversation, Keith. We're having this conversation because it's important for people, not just tenants, not just landlords, but people everywhere, right? It's so important to make sure that a will is prepared and in place. Now, because I follow my father's guidance, I'm a daddy's girl. My father raised me. I just kind of follow his footsteps. So every year, and I know some people, it spook people out when I say this, Keith, but every year I update my own obituary. I don't want my loved ones to have to try to come up with what to say or what happened, or, I want to make sure that not just life insurance policy, but I want to make sure that the process is streamlined because um, when there are loved ones, when there are remaining loved ones who are left behind, it's bad enough that they're going through a grieving process, and so to have to go through grief and I have to figure out what's next or what do I do. Um, just take some time to plan things out. But Keith, I realize and I recognize that some tenants, they don't have loved ones.
Right.
Maybe they're elderly, or maybe they were the only child and they don't really have anybody left. But still, I suggest to have something in place so that at the very least, the landlord will know how to handle um, any remains, anything that's left over. Because here's the thing, and Keith, we talked about this, right? So we talked about the situation where the tenant passed away. The landlord discarded all the items because they didn't know that they
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be taking the tenant to court. There was a will in place, right? And this came up from a previous show, and one of our viewers shared this information. So I did some research. And so the landlord got rid of all the tenant things. There was a will in place, and some of the things that the landlord tossed out was in the will.
Mm-hmm.
So I want people to know, especially tenants, I want you to understand the importance of making sure that you have a will in place. It is a legally prepared document that states intentions for the distribution of your assets and your wealth after you pass away. So that's what a will is. If you didn't know, now you know.
Now you know.
So Keith, hey, Jason, thank you so much for tuning in. So, Keith, what I want to do now is let's talk about some information and some tips for landlords.
Okay.
All right. So, Keith, we already know that the lease does not expire because a tenant passes away, right?
Oh, actually, no. Yes, I just found that out.
Yeah.
I've done years. I mean, and it's funny how you always constantly keep learning. But yeah, so now where I'm at now in my new position, and I am at a senior property. I just did what 467 units that I manage.
Mm-hmm.
I probably have 30, I just did 39 units that offline I can't touch because of death. So it's 39 units on my portfolio that just we call death doors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning once the people pass away, usually I thought when they pass away, and you got keys or they passed away, you've seen them take them out of there. You're like, okay, wait for about a week or two, nobody come claim anything, you take the stuff out, but you can't do that now. That's
Mm-hmm.
so the legal way is once they pass away, you must file an eviction, and that's the problem. That's my hold. I gotta wait to get the court date. They gotta come out. I got some of my doors are tagged. I mean, of course, nobody can answer them because people pass away, but you have to wait for the court date, go to the court, then let the judge give you the eviction date, and then evict the person that's not there. So you have to go through the process legally because if you can, I've done it before. I ain't gonna lie, I've done it not knowing. Move people out after they pass away and think, okay, nobody come claim the stuff, move them out. But we're at fault. If anybody come and claim it, you're at fault as a landlord if you move them out without going through the proper steps. So that's
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. So Keith, I have managed several senior communities where either they were all seniors or seniors and disabled. Um, and I'm sure, Keith, if you've managed senior properties before, you've probably found tenants in the apartments deceased.
oh yeah, we'll talk about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. That's
in
been
one community, because it was all seniors, I think I was finding a tenant at least once a month.
yeah. That's,
Um, and
that's why.
yeah,
Okay,
and that's something that I know that landlords don't really prepare for, but I just want landlords to know that as long as you are in this business, as long as you are in this industry,
yeah.
keep living, keep serving, keep managing properties. At some point, you may encounter that. And so, um,
Let me.
listen, I promise, keep that death is one of those scents that you never forget. If you
Never
if you if you ever find a tenant deceased in a rental property that's been there for some days and body just kind of decomposed, that's a
stay.
smell that you'll never forget.
It stays right here. Yeah. Let me just share a story with you. Because I'm at a senior site, and it was told a story. I didn't witness it, but they said that someone, and it still baffled me. We was talking, and one of my maintenance guys was like, "Yeah, Mr. Giles, someone passed away in a building, right? Do you know how long the person that passed away before they noticed the person was passed away? You know how long?
How long?
8 months.
Wait, you meant 8 days?
8 months. They were in a building. They were in a unit. Right. I can't even fathom that. But I say, my first thing that came to mind was the stench with the neighbors would have been unbearable. The police went there, they did a wellness check. The police went in there 3 times. Couldn't, it was empty, they thought. And then my maintenance guy said he went in there and the guy was actually in the closet under clothes. All of the skin and bones. I
Wow.
mean, his bones was, skin was just all the fluids. I'm like, so they have, of course, do decontaminate and all this stuff department. But they say he was in there for 8 months.
Wow.
Unbelievable. I,
Yeah, that's so
that's probably one
sad.
of the wildest stories I've ever heard in my whole almost 30 years of property management. And I've heard some stories of, finding, when you're on the senior property, is inevitable. You're going to get a lot of death. You'll see some
Yeah.
people in the way. But to be, it's so many questions that go through my mind. How, 8 months? But yeah, I'm like,
So now, as I heard you talk, and one of the things that stood out with the 8 months, um, how that could be possible.
I
It
don't know.
may have been possible during the pandemic, right? So during
Mhm.
the pandemic, I know that a lot of landlords, they stopped doing inspections. They were not going out,
Right,
you
right.
know. And so in that case, I can see it being possible that a tenant was deceased in the rental property for 8 months. But outside of that, landlords should be conducting inspections, the property manager, somebody should be conducting inspections.
And what made it really, I guess, not hard, because still that the rent was being paid. So the outside agency, the senior, on subsidy, so the rent was being paid. So you didn't have the rent to pay. I guess would have been a big flag if the rent would have stopped. You'd be like, okay, but if the rent constantly being paid, they just don't see them. It's a big building. You're like, okay, I don't see them. Maybe on the trip, you don't know. But then I'm thinking like the stench and all that. But it may have been, you made a good point. It may have been during the COVID time when nobody was checking, or that was still of 2 years that we went through. Yeah, so it could have been right during that time. But I'm just amazed at the smell, because like you say, the smell of death is a smell like no other.
Yeah. And even during the pandemic, when I was managing a senior property, I was still conducting inspections. I mean, I had to, because in one rental property, one rental community, we had inspections that were completed by an agency. So I still had to make sure that those units were inspected, that the repairs were completed, and in many cases, tenants, they didn't want me to come out. They didn't want the team, to come out. They didn't want repairs completed, but we had to do it. And that's how I found those tenants. Like I said, I found a tenant at least once a month in that particular community, in that one community. And it was heartbreaking to see tenants. They were just expiring. They were just passing in the unit, in the apartment. But that I still can't get over the smell. Like, how can someone not know that something is off? Now, I can understand, with the agency paying the tenant's rent, there was no break in the money coming in. So they had no way of knowing. Now, like you said, if it was a tenant who was responsible for paying their full amount of the contract rent each month, and maybe they skipped a month, then that would have been a red flag. That would have been a signal that something is off. Like, okay, I'm not getting money this month, so something is going on. But the fact that they were getting money from an agency, yeah, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I just call it what it is. Somebody wasn't doing their job, because there's no way you should go 8 months.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, that's a long time. That's pretty long.
I mean, because see, here's the thing, Keith. Even if inspections were not happening, maintenance repairs should have been going on. Somebody should have been cleaning the hallways.
Right.
The common area outside of the apartment door. Something should have. Yeah.
What is the smell? Like, do a wellness check. Something's going on in there.
Yeah. And so that's a good point, Keith. And so with that, the estate of the deceased, they are still liable for the remainder of the lease agreement. Right. So if landlords have to take the tenant to court, the deceased tenant to court, to get the unit back, any money that's owed, any money that's outstanding, the landlord can get from the estate. But it has to be done legally. It has to be done through the court system. And so that's what I want landlords to know. Landlords can use the deceased tenant security deposit also, Keith, to pay for the rent, unpaid rent.
Yes.
They can use the security deposit. And so these are just some tips that I want landlords to know. And it's not just for unpaid rent, but it's also may have been for any damages to the property, or any other costs established or that has been agreed upon in that rental lease agreement. And so those are the tips that I wanted to share today, Keith, with tenants as well as landlords, because we know how valuable this information is. We know how important this information is. And I know, Keith, like we both said in the beginning, it's a topic that a lot of people just don't want to tackle. They don't want to talk about it, but it's important. We're all going to pass away. We all will die.
Right.
Keith, do you have any other tips, any other information that you want to share before we close out?
I wanted to actually was something that I'm just thinking about, and it just, the old dimension has hit me. But I was thinking about something and it ran out of my mind. Give me a second. it was something I want to speak about. It was pertaining around to the it's pertaining to what we were just talking about. And oh my God, I can't think now. I hate that. It'll come to me. It'll come to me. But no, so no, I'm just gonna let it go because the more I think about it, the more further it'll get away from my mind.
That's the sign of young age.
Woo, man, that always kicking in. I was just like,
Hey,
okay,
Lynette, thank you so much for tuning in from North Carolina. Hey, beautiful.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, so
So,
Lynette, listen, I know that you're familiar with real estate and real estate investing. So tonight we talked about just tips and information, not just for tenants, but for landlords as well. Hello, Mama Bishop. Happy Marvelous Monday, beautiful. Thank you for tuning in. So Keith, this was good. This was good information to share.
mm-hmm.
It was helpful information for landlords as well as for tenants. So let me just do a recap for tenants. You want to make sure that you are providing your landlord with your emergency contact information. You always want to make sure that your landlord, your property manager, the owner of your rental property can contact somebody on your behalf if something happens. You also want to consider getting a power of attorney. This gives someone to act on your behalf, to take care of your business, to communicate with your landlord. If you're in any type of housing program, this allows your loved ones, your next of kin, your family members to communicate not just with your landlord, but your case manager, your social worker, the housing agency, because without it, the Privacy Act, privacy laws prevents others from discussing your information. And then also, you also want to consider getting a will, because that's going to be so important. And I know that, maybe this is not something that you're thinking about. Maybe if you're young, you think that you're going to live long, and prayerfully you will, but it's still good to have this information available. So we shared information for landlords. We want landlords to know and understand that when a tenant passes away, that death does not automatically terminate that lease agreement. You do have to take that tenant to court. And that also, please know and understand that the estate, if there's any money outstanding for unpaid rent or damages, the estate of that deceased tenant is responsible for that. And then finally, for landlords, you can use the security deposit to pay for rent and things like that.
Yeah.
So Keith, I don't have any other tips or topics that I want to share today, but I do think that this was helpful.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was very helpful. Great topic as always. I think it's something that's needed. And it's like I always say, I love the platform because the stuff we talk about, the stuff you share, it seems, I guess, because we know it or you've been around it for, it seems minute, but those things help. You never know somebody out there saying, oh, you're making, and that's basically what I feel is a great accomplishment of your platform is have people's minds start turning. Like a lot of stuff that you've said throughout your show and your the time I've been on, it always makes me go back, look at my notes, and think and rethink stuff and just stay on your toes. So I appreciate you for that. Great job. I appreciate it. So this is a really good, helpful. Again, another great platform, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Keith. Listen, it's always a pleasure to have you here. You are a wealth of information, wealth of knowledge. I'm happy and excited that you are always making yourself available to join me and to just share, in the discussion with my viewers who are tuned in. Keith, I look forward to you coming back next week. We'll have another dynamic and hot topic to discuss. So I hope that you'll come back and join us next Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Absolutely. You have me. I'll be back.
All right. So, guys, listen, our time is up and we thank you for yours. I'm Karissa Span, the landlord and tenant coach. Please make sure that you are tuning in each and every Monday right here on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have a topic or information that you would like for me to cover pertaining to landlord and tenant matters, please feel free to inbox me. You can always email me. My email address is carissaspan gmail.com. And I promise to share information that will impact the entire rental community. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that something that we shared today was of value. Please feel free to share it with others, but we look forward to seeing you all right here next week at 7:30 p.m. right here on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. I'm going to say bye for now.